Okay, so in this video we're going to look at straightening this video, and we're going to look at patching some of these distractions up. For example, I'd like to get rid of some of these shadows, some of the people. We're going to look at getting rid of some of these plinths. Now you may recognize this photo. This was done as part of the editing challenge in the summer, and I'm not going to go through the whole process here, simply because when I did this in the summer, this took me several hours to go through and process. So the first thing we want to do is to straighten this. And to straighten this, now I'm in Lightroom, or Lightroom Classic, and I'm going to go down to the transform tool. If you're using an earlier version of Lightroom, and I know there's one or two people out there who are, you'll find the transform tool comes under lens corrections, but you won't have all of these options. In fact, I don't think you've got any of these options in anything prior to Lightroom 6. But you do have these, and so you can do things like rotate. So we can rotate the image to get it straight, or get it something like that. This obviously leaves some right triangles, but we'll fix this. Now if you click on constrained crop, it will automatically get rid of those right triangles, but this goes and cuts off the soldier's foot. So I'm not a big fan of doing constrained cropping here. So let's go back to that. So what I would do is I would take this into Photoshop and I would patch it up in Photoshop. But before we do that, you would also probably want to crop out to get rid of a lot of this guard box here, and as I say, I want to get rid of all of these people. They're not adding anything to the story. And what you've got is this padlock. This padlock will constrain the aspect ratio to basically as shot. And you've also got a whole load of standard ones here, so you could go for 1:1 or 4:5. But if you click the padlock, it'll unlock, and now when we adjust the handles to crop, it will do it only on one side at a time. So we can bring this right the way down, something like that. Now that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing this, if we undo everything, is back in the transform tool. We have auto, which will automatically try and level it, and it does a pretty good job, but it's still a bit close on the soldier's foot. We've got guided, so let me undo this change, where we can draw lines down where we have the verticals. So there's a vertical line there. We need at least 2 of these. You can go up to 3. So if you had this one up here, which should be horizontal, we might draw that one in there, and it will change the image, the aspect ratio of the image, to try and get things level and vertical. Again, got a little bit more space at the bottom of the foot, but it's still a bit on the tight side. So let's undo all of that. Then we have level, which will just try and level the photo. We'll undo that one. We have vertical, which will just try and fix the vertical, so it doesn't try to get this building here on the right hand side level, but it's got most of the other ones pretty much vertical. And then we've got this one, full, which will try and do everything. And I think in this case, this gives us a better starting point. So again, I'm going to go into clone. We'll undo the padlock, and we will just pull in on the left hand side. We'll pull in on the right hand side. Now this looks to me it may still need a slight rotation, and we can just fix that by just clicking on the angle here. We have a little slider that we can just use to slide round, or we can go outside of the the bounding area with the crop, and you see how the cursor up here goes into a double-headed arrow, and that allows us to rotate it freehand. And so I think we're going to go with something like that. I'm just going to adjust the crop again, because I think as a consequence we can just go out here a little bit, and we might be able to just go up. I'd like to try and keep as much of the crop in here as I can, or the image as I can, but obviously we're constrained by where the edges are. That's not looking too bad. Now, before I fire this off into Photoshop, there's a couple of things that we can do in here which I think will help us. So if I choose this second tool here on this top panel, incidentally these tools are also available in Camera Raw, so if you don't like using Lightroom, you can do this in Camera Raw. This is the spot removal tool, and we have two modes here. We have heal and clone. By default, well actually I'll say by default, on my system I have this set to heal, because normally I'm removing things like bits of litter from a landscape, in which case heal works better than clone. So we'll try it on here on heal, and I'm just going to wipe around this plinth, and that's done a pretty good job. Got a couple of artifacts in here, but we can try and fix those up, and we'll probably do that inside Photoshop. We're going to have to take this into Photoshop to get rid of these white triangles, and then we'll just try and do this one here. I'm not going to do these two because these are overlapped by this plinth, and I don't want to remove that. So I'll say done on there. If sometimes you get a slight outline in here, if I click on that pin, just try doing clone rather than heal. Sometimes that just works better, in which case in this one I might just grab the source pin and we'll just adjust that just to get this crack in the paving slabs just to line up a little better. I'll say done on there. Okay, so I'm now going to fire this off into Photoshop. So we'll choose edit in Photoshop, and obviously we're going to edit this with Lightroom adjustments. So we're just coming into Photoshop. Let's just resize this. To resize that quickly, I just held down the Control key on the PC. It would be the Command key on the Mac, and I pressed 0. That just expands it up to full size. If we use Control and then the plus or minus keys, then we can just resize this manually. So minus will make it smaller, plus makes it bigger, and then 0 gets it to fit. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is, before I go any further, is I'm going to get rid of these triangles. To do this, I'm going to select the magic wand tool, and we'll just click in that area there. And the secret to making this work effectively is to go to Select, Modify, Expand. You can do this inside Photoshop Elements, by the way. So, you know, this isn't just particular to Photoshop. We'll say OK to that. Then we're going to go to Fill. Now we have this content aware fill, and I'll show you why I tend not to use this. So what this is going to do is going to sample the green area to fill that space up there. But I don't want it to choose the soldier's hat, so I'm just going to paint over the soldier's hat. Obviously don't want it to use the gun, and I really don't want it to use the window. So we'll paint out the window there, paint out this window here, and up there, paint out this bit here, and the sentry box, because I don't want it to use that. I don't want it to use the doorway. And if we say OK to this, you can see it's okay, but it's not great. So if I undo that, and what we'll do, instead of doing content aware fill, I'm just going to choose fill and then choose contents as content aware in here. and then we'll say OK. And I find most often that does a better job. Of course, this time it's proving me to be wrong. So let's do this one again. So go back to open. Okay, so we just choose modify the selection and expand it by 3 pixels, and then I'm just going to choose edit, fill, and then we make sure this is set to content aware. And I find that most often this does a better job at actually filling that area up there, and it doesn't leave me with any artifacts. In fact, I do this technique so often that I actually have a macro set up to do most of the heavy lifting. So all I do is I select the area and then I run my content aware fill action, and if people are interested in that, you're certainly welcome to it. Now, as we can see down here where we've filled in this triangle down here, we've got a few odd artifacts. So to fix that, I'm just going to add a new blank layer, and then I'm going to choose the clone tool. And with the clone tool, and I'm going to choose sample as set to current and below, and I'm just going to choose this area here as my source, and then we'll come down in here and we'll just paint that in. I'm going to choose this area here as my source. Whoops, wrong button. As my source, and then we will just come down there, clone that. That's okay. I'm going to again choose this area. We'll just get rid of this bit here. Sometimes we might need to make the brush a little bit smaller, just so we can avoid those artifacts, and that just merges that in a bit. There we go, that's looking a little bit better. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to get rid of this plinth. Now this is obviously overlapping this one here, so what we need to do is to select this area so we can protect it. To do that, I'm going to choose the polygon lasso tool, and then in here, if we just zoom in a bit, so we're just using Control Plus here to zoom in, and I'm just going to draw around this plinth. Just going to shoot straight across here because we're going to do this one as well. Let's just go up there, and we can come down and we can just click on that to protect it, or to join those dots up. Now what we've done is we've selected that plinth itself, which is not what we want. So what I need to do is to invert that. So if we go to the select menu and we can choose inverse, which on the PC is Shift Control I, on the Mac it would be Shift Command I. And this has now selected the rest of the area. So this part in here is not selected. So now I can select, for example, the spot healing brush, and I can just paint in there, get rid of all of that. And I'm on the wrong layer, of course, so let's do that again. Let's go back to layer 0, which is the background, and get rid of that plinth, and that protects this box up here. And we can do the same thing on this one. Okay, probably need to come in there just to get rid of that bit of shadow there. And if we zoom in on this, again, let's click on this layer 1, which is I'm going to call this our clone layer, and this one is our background. Now when you first come into Photoshop, that will be called background by default. Of course it's no longer called background because we did the patching of those two triangular areas in there. So let's just patch this area up. So let's go back onto the clone layer and we'll choose the clone tool, and we're just going to choose some areas which are going to be roughly the same colour, so something like that. We can just go through here. Obviously we don't want that, we'll get rid of that in a moment. If we deselect everything, what I would like to do is grab hold of that area there, and we can just patch this part up. There we go. Let's just clone that area here. Now the secret to cloning is to try and make sure, is first of all not to try and do too much at once. And where we've got an area such as here, where we've got a crack in the pavement here, then it disappears and then it starts again, is not to try and clone the same area all the time. We've also got artifacts there, so let's get rid of that artifact first. We'll just sample here and we'll come down there. Yeah, we can sample, I don't know, let's sample this bit here so we can get some lines coming in. Oop, wrong place. Let's just grab you, and so we can just make that line up a little better, and then we can bring that down. We need to get rid of, hang on, what's gone here? We need to get rid of that, so that's fine. We can just clone this area out. So the secret to doing all of this is to just do little bits and keep resampling. Just keep resampling so we can just complete the illusion here. We may decide that we want to bring in a line down there, so we can clone that one, and that can bring that in through there. Let's just clone that and make this a little smaller, and we can just bring that in there. And it's just making this look a little bit more realistic. Let's just grab that. We can just patch this up. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, it's just because this is just time consuming. But by doing this we can actually patch things up a little bit. We might need to actually, just looking at this, just work on in this area here. So again, we will just grab hold of the clone tool, make this a little bit smaller. We'll clone this area here, and we will just patch that area up, and we can come into there. Let's just grab this bit up here, and we'll just follow that angle down just to tidy this up. There we go. Control 0. Now I'm not going to do the cannon, as I said previously. When I did this originally, this took me hours to go through. I would estimate this probably took me a day and a half work just to get this looking decent by dropping the cannon down. And I urge you to look at the other video on editing, edit number 7, to see all the different layers and what's involved. Now we can also do something else. When I dropped this down, I had the impression that this sentry box was too high. So let me expand my clone tool up again. And so to do that, what I did was I cloned an area above this sentry box, and then just pulled it down like that, not forgetting to do the shadow. And that just adjusts the height of that sentry box. Now there's a few other artifacts in here I'd like to clean up. So one of the other things that we do is on the spot healing brush, if you drop that down, we can choose the patch tool, and in here we can just draw an area, and then we can just drag this around, something like that, and it will try to patch things in. So if we deselect that and we go to before we patched it, and after we patched it, oh that's because I'm on the wrong layer, oops. So let's go back there, we'll select that area and we'll just drag that down. That's looking better. And then we can just select this, and so we can go through and we can just patch things up and try and match colours and tones and so forth a little better. Now obviously I spent much more time on this when I was doing this for the edit challenge. Let's just get rid of that. There we go. I spent much more time on this when I was doing the edit challenge, and as I said, it was several hours. to get rid of this. And I do urge you to look at that video. I don't do the video in real time because obviously nobody's got 8 hours of time to watch somebody just cloning stuff out, but there's quite a lot of work in doing that. Then the final thing I want to do is to just deal with this guy up here. So to do this, I'm going to add a new blank layer. Actually, I'm not going to add a new blank layer. I'm going to add a new solid color layer. And what we're going to do on here is choose a blue color. I'll say OK to that. Let's invert my mask, and then with a white brush, what I'm going to do in here is just brush this out. Or you could alternatively, if you wanted to do it, is to use the polygon select tool and we can just go down through here, select this area, don't need to be too concerned about that colour up there because that's the sky, which we're going to keep anyway. Go down to here, back up to the top, there we go. And if I get rid of that mask and delete that, and then we add a new mask, then that selects that colour. Now that's not a very good match, so let's go back into here and we can choose a better colour. And if we then change the blend mode to overlay or soft light or maybe colour, no, actually we'll keep it at normal. And then we're just going to adjust the colour just to get something which looks vaguely sky-like. Something like that would probably do the job. Now I'm doing this quickly, you'd want to do more with feathering and so forth, but that gives the idea. When I did this originally, the plan was to send this to black and white, and so the actual colour I use up there is not important because it's going to go black and white anyway. And that basically is really all there is doing it. The secret to good cloning is to just keep choosing areas. You choose a different area and just clone it in there, and just try and make it not look as though you've got repeating areas. And that's really is the secret of good cloning. So let's get rid of that crack in the pavement there. Let's do it on the right layer. Nope. Just get rid of that crack in the pavement. That's what I'm trying to do. There we go. And it's just trying to make it look as though you don't have repeating areas. And you do that just by clone a little bit, sample somewhere else, and yeah, and that's really all you're going to be doing. So and yeah, so that is the secret. Don't try and do everything at one go. Do it a little piece at a time. Choose different areas to clone different parts, and then that way you can avoid repeating patterns, and it doesn't look as though you've actually gone in there and cloned something. Quite often we see in competitions, for example, that when people clone stuff, because they try to do too much at once with one source location, you get that repeating pattern. And I stress, the secret is not to use the same source all the time, but just keep sampling, do a little bit, sample somewhere else, do a little bit, sample somewhere else, do a little bit. And that's really all you need to do to actually start getting some of these distractions. Now, as I say, I actually turn this black and white, so we can do this just to give you an idea. By sending it to black and white, the fact that that was some kind of turquoise colour actually isn't that apparent at all. And if I really wanted to, I could probably pull down the cyans up there, and that actually just darkens that section and it becomes less obvious. Now, I would have used a feathered brush to actually mask that out so it doesn't look quite so abrupt. That does look a little bit odd in my opinion, but at the end of the day, that's up to you and how much time you want to spend on it. But it is just a painstaking process. Okay. So to give you an idea of, or remind you what the finished photo looked like in colour, I stress, not in black and white. This is all of the layers that I ended up having to put in to get this to work. So we have this replace sky layer, which is handling that part up there. It's just a solid colour layer, just to actually try and get that a better balance. Then we have, if I actually get rid of all of these layers, so this is the original photo. We have a layer here to get rid of the artifacts, which looks a bit of a mess, but that's because this is getting rid of stuff that after I dropped the Canon down, it got rid of the extra bits that were actually showing up. Then we added a layer to remove the sky, as I said, another one to remove some Canon at the end there. Then we copied this shoulder and I moved it over here. And then I've got a layer where I selected the Canon, and then I just dropped it down, and so that completed the illusion, and all of the messy stuff that we have in here got hidden by that layer. And then finally we just did some stuff. So I felt on the photo that the walls were a bit on the bright side, so I just darkened those walls. Again, just continue to darken those down a bit, and then just added a bit of sharpening on there. And then that's how that photo looked after I finished it. It was then sent back into Lightroom, and in Lightroom all I did in here was to go down into and set a profile up, and if I remember rightly, I think I chose blue as my profile, and that is what gave me my black and white photo, and that's really where I left it. Okay, thank you.